she accidentally got involved in investigating sex trafficking and human trafficking. She passed state laws to prevent grooming, and she's here to talk about that and how to protect children and the warning signs of human trafficking and sex trafficking. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. It's free. And get the latest crime and law enforcement news on the Newsbreak app. It's simple, easy, and free. Just download the Newsbreak app. Then search for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Contact us from Florida. We have Allie Hopper on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Allie, first of all, thank you for agreeing to come on the show. Talk about something that it's not easy to talk about. Sex trafficking, human trafficking, how you accidentally got involved in this, some of the warning signs that parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, concerned neighbors need to be aware of, all that stuff. And by the way, you can get more information about her at Sadulski.com. That's Sadulski.com. And if that name sounds familiar, Jared Sadulski, her partner, was on the show several months ago, and he got involved in sex trafficking investigation, human trafficking, I believe, with the Coast Guard, and continued on. First of all, thank you for agreeing to be on our show. Secondly, thanks for all you do. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
One of the things that really got my attention, Allie, is, am I saying it right? Is it, because nowadays you just don't know. Is it Allie, short for Allison, or is it Ali?
Yeah, so it's Allie, short for Alicia.
Oh,
but
okay.
I go by Allie.
Okay, that works for me. So I'll call you Allie. One of the things that really got my attention is that you did not start off saying, I'm going to become an expert in human trafficking and sex trafficking. This kind of snuck into your life the back doorway, didn't it?
It did. I've always been involved, active in the community to protect and defend children, and also my heart and passion is also with our veterans. My husband is a Marine Corps veteran. He served in the military, and we met while he was active duty.
No, you're kidding me. You're a military spouse?
I am.
My mother's a Navy mom, and I always say this because my dad's career Navy. There's no one on the face of the planet more powerful than military spouses.
Yeah, it was definitely a firsthand experience. I've never experienced deployments. I've never experienced the fear of having a loved one overseas, and so it was definitely a first for my family. My grandparents served, but I didn't know them at that time, obviously, so it was a hard experience, but I definitely grew stronger from it. And then when he got out, I was very much involved in the treatment and the aftercare of our veterans. So that was one of the pieces or the components that I was actively involved in, was protecting veterans. I've always had a passion, too, for protecting children, and especially when we became parents ourselves, that motivated us more so to make sure that our communities and our children are protected.
The whole veteran thing, I get. It's I hate to say it, it's obvious. If you are a military spouse, you get firsthand exposure to what the problem is. And what a lot of Americans see is they see, and I'm air quoting, homeless, some people call them houseless, whatever. A lot of these people are military veterans. A lot of them have mental health issues and drug and alcohol issues, and they see them on the streets and no one's taking care of them. It's obvious that there is a problem. I don't dispute the fact that you decide, I want to get involved in that. What I don't see is how the human trafficking, sex trafficking, that's kind of kept under the covers. People don't see that as openly.
No, they don't. And the process to change things like how the VA works, it's not very easy to navigate. So when you're starting to dabble in politics and policy, more so policy than politics. That's a new space that not many people are familiar with, and I didn't have a lot of experience going into that space, but I did have firsthand knowledge of what worked for me, what worked for my husband when he got out. He got out with a strong disabilities package, rightfully earned. However, a lot of his friends that had gone through the same traumatic experiences didn't have that person that advocated for them, and they got out and they filed for their disability, and a year later, and then they didn't get near the rating that my husband got. So I quickly jumped into policy, and we ended up moving from our prior state to Florida, and quickly within that time frame, I got connected with people on the ground in Florida that were focused on child protection. So my focus, again, has always been on veterans and children. And so when I had met this mom who was advocating for a bill, which was an amendment to the Illinois grooming bill, I told her that I would take a look as a paralegal, and I would take a look and see what we could do in Florida. So quickly from there, I realized that her language was an amendment to a grooming bill in Illinois, meaning that bill already exists in their statute. Those statutes exist, so she was trying to amend a statute. I looked at Florida, and we didn't have a statute that even was remotely close to that. So I took it back to my dad, who's an attorney, and I was like, okay, we're going to have to fix this because this is an amendment. We can't amend a statute that doesn't exist, so we're going to have to start from scratch. We're going to have to work to develop a statute.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. We did research on the statutes around child protection. We realized there was a major gap, and we spoke with law enforcement officers, and the gap was confirmed that law enforcement had no real way to intervene on situations where a child was being manipulated, inappropriate communication and conduct was occurring prior to a luring and enticing situation, or obscenity laws or pornography was occurring. So we wanted to bridge that gap before a child was being put into a luring and enticing situation.
And how long ago was this that you got involved in that?
So we moved to Florida in 2021 and wrote the language in 2023, and by a couple months later, by September, we were already on our way to Tallahassee with a package to pitch to lawmakers.
That in itself, number one, recognizing there's a problem. And people say this all the time. Oh, someone should do something. And my usual response is, well, what's wrong with you? Why don't you do something about it? When you say you recognize a problem, that this law didn't exist, what possessed you in thinking that you could be the impetus of making the change?
I've always advocated for being the change you wish to see, and my family has always been that way. We don't wait for someone else to get the work done. If we want it done, and we want it done right, and we want it done now, the best way is to do it ourselves.
I agree. Some people are probably saying, that guy, John J. Wiley's a bit of a control freak. Yeah, I'm pretty good at delegating things, but I'm of the mindset if you want something done a certain way and you want it done now, you gotta do it yourself. Because if you depend on other people for your future, for your outcome, you might be severely disappointed. We're talking with Allie Hopper on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're going to talk more about how she got involved with sex trafficking, human trafficking, the warning signs, and you get more information about her at sadulski.com. That's SADULSKI.com. You can find us on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Did you know that there are 3 things you can do to dramatically increase your revenue, both offline and online? That's one of the things you'll learn at CreativeCon 2025. Plus, meet me, John J. Wiley, the host of the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast at CreativeCon, located at the fabulous Intercontinental Hotel in Chicago, February 21st through 23rd. You'll learn how to take your business to the next level. CreativeCon 2025 is the ultimate business and networking event. That's CreativeCon 2025 at the fabulous Intercontinental Hotel, Chicago, February 21st through 23rd, 2025. Get more information at CRE8TIVE.com. Again, that's CRE8TIVE.com.
Did you know that there are people earning $30,000 or more per month from Meta or Facebook? Did you know that you can too? All without breaking the time bank. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Return our conversation with Allie Hopper on the Law Enforcement Talk radio show. Allie is contacting us from the state of Florida, which I happen to be in as well. And she accidentally got involved in investigating sex trafficking and human trafficking, which we'll talk about in a few moments. She helped write laws in Florida to prevent grooming of sexual assaults on children, which we'll talk about more. You get more information about her online at sadulski.com, SADULSKI.com. I got to applaud you, Allie, for making this happen because it's a daunting task. You said a couple times about politics and policy. I don't discuss either one, but I found in my experience, it's a lot harder to change policy than it is to get politicians. Politicians say a lot, they don't do a lot.
Yeah, and that's actually very accurate. When we went up to Tallahassee, it was a very interesting experience. Again, we had never done something like this before. We've never written legislation or introduced it. We're not lobbyists. I mean, we are just everyday people. I'm a mom. I work full-time. And we just saw a need, and we decided that we were going to do something about it. What was nice is that we wrote the language in the way that we felt was going to be the strongest from a legal perspective to give law enforcement the ability to intervene and judges the ability to sentence the ability to sentence. So a bill with teeth. What was nice is this bill was one page, very narrow in scope, and it was just really focused. And so whenever we talk about, okay, all these bills are filled with all this stuff that doesn't relate. Okay,
we call it pork. A lot of people call it pork because it doesn't really apply, but it's like, oh, we'll fund this airport.
Yeah, so there was a lot of advice to insert all of this different pieces of language in these components, and we said, no, we're going to keep it very focused. And so we made sure once it got to Tallahassee that the lawmakers that signed on were dedicated to what we were trying to do. They took it upon themselves to interview sex crimes, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Department of Children and Family Services. Like, we did it all the right way and got it passed and signed into law early this year. So lobbyists were looking at us like, how did you get this passed in under a year's time on its first try? And it's just by taking that common sense solution and not bogging it down with unnecessary language. But the content of the bill is so important to us because grooming in communities of children can happen anywhere, at any time, online, in person. And parents need to be aware of not only what their children are doing, but how they can protect their children.
Right. Look, there's nothing more frustrating as a police officer that when there's no law, when we all recognize that behavior is inappropriate, something should be done, but you can't do anything because they've not broken any laws. And I know yours is not related directly to the internet, but a lot of things, a lot of stalking, a lot of threatening, a lot of harassing going on with the internet, and it didn't really fit into laws from different states. So my hat's off to you. And the whole grooming thing, I want to close on this. I'm very much an old-fashioned, hands-on kind of guy, father. And if someone's grooming my daughters, you could be in for a rude awakening. A very rude awakening. And I have, there's an old saying in Baltimore, I'll take a charge for that. I'll go to jail for that. It's not a problem. That's the kind of guy I am. But people shouldn't be in that position without the laws to back it up. There's really nothing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to understand grooming, many situations, and this is how I ended up kind of segueing into human trafficking, is that human trafficking, aside from the issues of the border, human trafficking that happens within our country, many cases, actually 9 times out of 10, are through grooming and recruiting situations. They're not through snatching grabs off the street or kidnapping situations. While that does happen, a majority of them are situations where a child is being groomed, whether it's in person or online, and they end up being recruited into a situation that they're not anticipating is going to end in sexual assault or human trafficking.
We talked about this many times, and I'm significantly older than you, Allie, but when we were young, it was beware of the boogeyman, the guy down the street with a, hey, would you help me find my kittens, or I got candy, or whatever it might be, and a creepy van. That's what you worried about. Nowadays, you have to really pay attention to your electronic devices, because that's how a lot of kids are being groomed, is through gaming, through social media platforms, through chat, you name it.
Absolutely. It's through gaming, it's through apps, it's through social media. And like I said, it can happen in person, schools, sports, anywhere where there's an ability for a predator to lurk, they will lurk. So it's important for parents and the general public to be aware of what it looks like and what they can do about it, but then also for children to know what that looks like and to be able to develop that discernment and that awareness within our children so that they can understand and know when something doesn't feel right.
And the one thing you said that really, I think, needs to be repeated is predators. And people that are predators, humans that are predators, just like in nature, they attack the weakest link because they don't want to get injured. An injury, a lion, for example, if a lion gets injured attacking a gazelle or impala, whatever it might be, that's a death sentence for that lion. They know that. These predators do everything in their power to learn, to adapt, to fit in. So they use spoofing, they use all kinds of VPNs, they use everything imaginable so you can't find them. So you got to. I think it's important to be aware of the danger signs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, many of these situations when you're grooming a child, when a predator is grooming a child, it's to either end in sexual assault or human trafficking. And that's where I got my first introduction into human trafficking, was really understanding and speaking with, at the time, subject matter experts. Little did I know that within, a short amount of time, I would become one of those people that I was talking to with firsthand knowledge. But just speaking with those individuals about how many of those circumstances initially started with that component of grooming and befriending that child that just needed companionship.
You accidentally became one of those experts. And a lot of people that talk a big game about this, I think you can tell where I'm leading, is that's all they know, is they know to talk. They're parrots. They repeat what they've read somewhere or they heard somewhere. They're not experts. I'm not an expert in this. I know when I see inappropriate behavior, and quite often my response is not appropriate. Right? Yeah, I think you can relate to that. You're married to a military guy. He understands that.
Marine, yes, they have experiences much like you outlined.
Yes.
Especially when you get more into the infantry levels. But so quickly after I got the legislation passed, I was introduced to Dr. Sadolsky. And what Dr. Sadolsky does is it's really fascinating. He's done a ton of research, but really where he leans into this space is on the ground, in person, first-hand research. And
we're going to return to that conversation in just a moment. Get more details at Sadolsky.com. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
What could you do with an extra $500 to $5,000 a month or more? all earned from the comfort of your home or business, and all with Facebook. Meta is paying people just like you every month. They are earning tens of thousands of dollars, and so can you. Learn how to create another revenue stream from Meta and dramatically increase your reach, all without breaking your own time bank. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Return our conversation with Allie Hopper on the Law Enforcement Talk radio show. Allie is a military spouse, a veteran spouse, and she's a paralegal. She introduced and passed legislation in the state of Florida for anti-grooming for sexual assaults of children. My kudos, my hat's off to you for that. That's a major, major accomplishment. And she became an accidental expert in human trafficking and sex trafficking. Get more information about her online at sadulski.com. That's sadulski.com. Before we went to break, Allie, you're talking about meeting Dr. Jared Sadulski, and he's a subject matter expert. And he got, for those who've not heard the episode, several months ago, he was on a show. He got exposed to human trafficking and sex trafficking during his duties in the Coast Guard. And that continued on, and it became a passion of his. And I sense it's a passion of yours as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything related to protecting children. And when I had met Dr. Sadulski, I was really taken with the fact that not only did he conduct research by reading, all of these articles and these other individual research, he conducted it himself in person on the ground firsthand. And so I was really taken by the fact of not only was he conducting on-the-ground research himself to be able to confirm or negate what he was hearing and reading, he was really driven by the purpose of protecting children. And oftentimes I find that I struggle to align with some organizations or some individuals based on what their focus is, but I was easily able to align with Dr. Sadulski's because of that focus on protecting children, empowering our law enforcement, empowering our community to be able to fight back against this crime. It is really the largest humanitarian crisis of our lifetime.
One of the things, and I was impressed with Dr. Sadulski, Jared Sadulski, is that he seems like an open book. It doesn't seem like he has a lot of hidden motives. This is what it is, and I get the same feeling from you. This is what I'm all about. No fluff, no stuff. I'm not going to give you a line of you-know-what. I'm just going to tell you the facts. Exactly.
And so pretty quickly after, obviously he did his own vetting of me to make sure that my values and my what I wanted out of it aligned with what he was doing. And we quickly realized that was in alignment. And so we had gone to D.C. for his Senate hearing. And then shortly after, we actually conducted research at the southwest border. And then we went to a country in Central America, and we also went to Mexico.
I need to, and I'm glad you brought up the border. We think of this as being a border issue. Now, that is a component. I remember the interview with Dr. Sadulski, and he said, and I think I'm paraphrasing, he used the example of 23 children that came across the border. They're supposed to have sponsors here, and of those, 99% never made it to their location.
That's correct.
So you need to ask yourself this question: where are they? What's happening? What are people doing with them? The coyotes, whatever terms people want to use, they're involved in this. And you can explain more, but it's not just a border problem. This is an American problem, and it affects Americans as well, with sex trafficking and human trafficking.
Absolutely. I was at a speaking engagement a couple weeks ago, and it was in one of the states that actually border Canada. And one of the individuals said, well, we're not a border state. And I said, every state's a border state unless you get rid of planes, trains, and automobiles. Every state's a border state. And human trafficking, even aside from the border, has always existed. It's just increased in its, I guess, its strength since the borders have been more porous.
Right.
So
one of the things I became used
to
to is, as a police officer in Baltimore, we had an area called the Block, which is full of, and I'm air quoting, gentlemen's clubs, strip clubs, or whatever you want to call them. There's lots of different names for them. And the girls, the young ladies that worked there, that were dancers, that were entertainers, whatever term, and I'm air quoting again, whatever term, they came from Minnesota, Indianapolis, Indiana, Michigan, and they're on a circuit. A lot of these women got tricked into this, thinking, oh, it'll be a great lifestyle, I'll make a lot of money. Then they got hooked on drugs, and next thing you know, they're kind of stuck. They really are not. And I know that's not an example a lot of people like to think of, but that's the reality of what happens. And if you think that doesn't happen with our children, you are dead wrong.
Absolutely. Actually, a lot of these women, so they do end up getting trapped in the life, but what happens, or what we have found at the border with specifically migrants coming in, is that they have been told by cartels or gangs that they owe a certain debt and that they are to work to pay off that debt, whether it is sex or labor.
Right.
And so you find a lot of these adults and or children in these circumstances where they're conducting this, and I use air quotes, work to pay off that debt. And
usually it's the threat of bodily harm to family members that are back home.
Absolutely.
So it's not like they can just totally disappear. It's like, what's going to happen to my mom and dad, or what's going to happen to my aunts and uncles, my sisters, my brothers. And by the way, indentured servitude has been illegal in this country for a long time, but this still goes on.
Absolutely. And it's really sad to see, especially when you're looking at children. No child can consent to this type of work or any type of work. We have labor laws here, like you said. So nowhere can we permit a child that is 8, 9, 10 to be working to pay off their debt to a cartel or gang member.
And here's a good example, and we'll get back to your story in a moment. And I'm not picking on any ethnic group. If you go to ethnic restaurants, and it doesn't matter what the ethnicity is, and they have far more employees than should be financially responsible for what they do, and they all tend to live in the same house, that's a good indicator that they're being human trafficked, or not in this case sex trafficking, but human trafficking to work off a debt. And that debt sometimes never gets repaid, does it?
No, a lot of people that enter into the life never leave alive, unfortunately. You got to think the way in which these children are entering the air quote workforce. There's no labor laws being applied. There's no, okay, you've worked 8 hours, now you're going to get overtime. They work for cents on the dollar. There's no OSHA, involved in this. So as far as protection for safety, there's none of that. So, I mean, you got to think that the quality of life and how long they actually live, many of them don't make it out.
The sad reality is, and again, this goes back to earlier conversation. We see a problem, someone says someone should do something about it. And one of the things that I really don't have a lot of tact with is, and I'm going to use plain language, if you are a John and you pick up prostitutes on the street, you're part of the problem. If you go to some of these ethnic restaurants and you spend your money because it's cheaper than going to the competition that's not involving human trafficking, you are part of the problem. You're the reason why this exists. If you stop doing that, all of a sudden there's less demand. I'm getting
Absolutely.
off my soapbox now. So I apologize for that. So,
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, we have to hold these businesses accountable, these business owners accountable. I mean, they have to know that, yes, they need to be able to operate their business, but they can't operate it illegally. We have standards here. We have labor laws here. That's why we look at legal status as well, because you're able to uphold certain standards by which that you agree when you hire somebody, they're going to pay their taxes and they're going to operate under certain protections for workers.
And
that doesn't apply when they're off the books.
You are so right. We're going to take a short break. We're talking with Allie Hopper. Get more details about her online at sadulski.com. That's SADULSKI.com. We're talking about how she became an accidental expert in sex trafficking and human trafficking. And when we return, we're going to talk about some of the warning signs that every parent, every grandparent, every aunt and uncle, concerned neighbor needs to know. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Do you want to be a guest on Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast? It's really quite simple. And before you get into this notion that I'm not a cop, I wasn't a cop, I don't have something to contribute. Well, the show is about investigating crime. That's one aspect of it from the real life perspective of those who did it. And then it's also about trauma, how trauma impacted them, often crime-based, but not always. Our guests quite often are law enforcement officers, other first responders, military, victims of crime, their spouses, or survivors, talking about how trauma impacted them, what happened, how it affected their lives, and how they rebuilt their lives after. If you want to be a guest, just contact me. It's really simple. Send an email to jay@letradio.com. That's jay@letradio.com. Or go to letradio.com and the Contact Us page, and you can get me right there as well. Return conversation with Allie Hopper on our Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Allie is, I'd say, an accidental expert in human trafficking and sex trafficking. She passed legislation in the state of Florida, no easy task, to prevent grooming of children for sex abuse and assaults and you name it. Allie, thanks for being a guest on the show. Thanks for having a difficult conversation, and thanks for having more class than I do. A lot of times that it's a very easy thing to do because I don't have a lot of class at times, especially when it comes to topics like this. So we had Dr. Jared Sadulski on the show several months ago, and he's your partner. Sadulski.com is where you get more details. We talked about human trafficking. We talked about sex trafficking, and people love to link those to politics. And you can't have a real conversation with people about it because they're like, well, so and so did this, well, so and so did that. And look, this is a problem. And I will just say this: if you don't like what's been happening, stop electing the same people. Stop it. Just don't do it anymore. Get rid of the excuses. Get rid of it, and stop frequenting these businesses. If you're John, stop it. For goodness sakes, don't do that anymore. One of the things that, and my daughters, they're in their 30s now. It's not a big deal, but I lose sleep when I wonder how parents do it nowadays with their children constantly being threatened by predators. And one of the things and maybe I'm wrong on this, I'd love to hear your input, is I'm not the cool dad. I'm not your friend. I will take your electronic devices from you, and you will not be in your room on the computer by yourself if you're a young child. Am I wrong when it comes to that?
Absolutely not. Until our children become adults, we aren't their friends. We're their friends after, parents first. And so, honestly, your first goal is to make sure that they're safe, they have a roof over their head, they're fed, and they're loved. But friend comes way, way, way longer down the line. So you're not wrong in that. A lot of these children don't understand the threat that's out there, and part of that is we're trying to protect and maintain their innocence. We want them to look at the world with a childlike view.
Right. We want them to be children for as long as possible. I always say this, and it's a little bit different topic. But my daughters, they're adults now, and I always said, the moment your life turns sexual, you can't go back. You're not a child anymore. And this is what's at stake. And we're talking about 10, 11, 12-year-olds that are being groomed by predators for really bad things. And some of these kids are very easily manipulated.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's happening inside the country and outside the country as well. I've had conversations with the Latin American country because I'm actually half Mexican, and I speak with them on a daily basis asking the tough questions. How are these cartel members convincing parents to let their children travel alone, that journey is harrowing and tough, and most people don't make it there alive. So how are they letting their children go on this journey alone? And I've found out through firsthand experience that many of them are in situations where it's being glamorized. This trip is being glamorized. Like, yes, we'll help your children get across the border. There's other children traveling. We'll get them to the sponsor of your choice. We'll get them to the location of your choice, and it'll be all good. Trusting these individuals, which oftentimes aren't cartel members knocking at their door, but then later the child is handed over to cartel and gang and then shuffled over the border.
So what do we look for? What are some of the warning signs we need to be aware of?
I would say it's very similar to the warning signs with grooming. It has to do with that ability of discerning whether someone is a bad actor or not. Do I feel like I'm in a safe place? Do I feel like this person is asking me the right questions? Are they maintaining healthy boundaries? So really establishing within our children, what is a healthy boundary? What is a healthy conversation? What is an unhealthy conversation? And I'm sure you know from within your work in law enforcement, those same skill sets can apply to protect children from ending up in domestic abuse situations, or, walking down the wrong side of the street down a dark alley. So it's those same skill sets where you're developing in your children how to discern and make good decisions on what's safe and what doesn't feel right to make sure that they're able to determine those circumstances.
And I will say this, it's okay to be the uncool parent. Right now, my daughters and I, we have a great relationship. We're friends. They're in their 30s. It's a different situation. But I recall, I'm in South Florida, and one of my daughters is like 15. And a guy called, and he was in like 23 or 24. And I grabbed that phone from her, and I was like, she's 15 years old. He's like, no. I said, if you show up at my house, this is what's going to happen. And I was very uncensored. I can't say it on the radio. That guy never called again. And I looked at her. I said, don't you ever put me in a position where I have to do that again. Ever.
Have you had a conversation with her about that since then, now that she's been an adult looking back?
She looks back, and she's like, that. It became funny. The funny thing is, Allie, is that once that moment occurred, she saw a side of me she didn't want to see. And it's like all the fun and games left. And it was, okay, this is serious. And he's serious. And we never had to discuss it again.
I'll tell you a quick story here. So it reminds me a lot of a situation that I was in. I was in high school, and my mom and I and my sister went on a spring break trip to France. And we were at a restaurant. We like to go to places that weren't tourist locations, so we wanted to get the feel and the look of being in an area that wasn't touristy. And so we were eating, and we were with another mom and her daughter, and this good-looking guy comes up and was talking with our table and was flattering the entire table and was like, hey, I'd love for your daughter to come out to this club. It would be a lot of fun. You guys don't worry about it. You can come, sit there and watch over her. And I remember my mom's friend saying, yeah, let's do it. That'll be fun. We'll be right there. And my mom was like, no, we're not doing this. And I remember the whole table had turned their attention on her as being the bad guy. And I remember as a teenager being really upset. Like, come on, it'll be fun. You'll be there. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. When am I going to get to go to a arena in France? And she said no. And looking back now in the work that I've done, do you know how easily that could have ended?
Yeah.
Easily. You're in a club with hundreds of people. All it takes is a split second for someone to disappear. If my mom had caved to the pressure of not only me as a teenager, but another adult saying, yeah, let's go, that could have ended really badly.
She did the right thing. She was the uncool parent, that's their job.
Yep. And looking back, and that's why I asked you if you've had a conversation with your daughter about it, because I've had a conversation with my mom about it after we've done all of this work, is I looked at her and I said, thank you.
Yeah.
Because knowing what I know now,
Maybe I
it would
will
have ended
call her.
badly.
Maybe I will call her and we'll talk about it. But I don't think it's funny thing, Allie, is I didn't need to have the conversation ever again. I'm a big advocate of if you're a parent, you do the right thing. It doesn't matter when. And your children will eventually come around to you, the same point of thought. But you don't get a do-over when things get really bad. And this is a classic example that happens a lot of times. Hey, I want your daughter to be a model for my photo shoot. How many serial killers have said that? And how many people fall for that still? It's not just a border problem. Allie, let's switch gears really quick. Sadulski.com, SADULSKI.com. That's your website. Can people reach out to you and get in touch with you there?
Absolutely. My email is there. There's a contact us spot where you can reach out to me and or Dr. Sadulski. We work closely together on everything. So if you get one of us, you'll get both of us. And
I want to thank you for all you do. When you have a chance, when you talk with your husband, tell him I said thank you for your service. I know that sounds trite, but it applies to both you and him as well. Allie Hopper, thanks so much for all you do, and thanks for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
This was a podcast version of the nationally syndicated Law Enforcement Talk radio show, and we are so glad that you decided to join us. Big thanks to our guests for telling their story on the show. 2 simple things you can do. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com. That's letradio.com. And be sure to follow us or like us on Facebook. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Talk radio show. And be sure when you see a post that we put up that you like, that you resonate with, that gets your attention, be sure to share it with your friends. Back in just a few days, another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.